I remember the exact sound of the kettle that morning, the way it began as a hush and then climbed into a thin, patient song, like it had somewhere important to be. Mine always did. I've lived long enough to learn that even objects in a house carry habits, the same way people do. The kettle whistled the way it had for decades, and I moved on instinct to steps to the stove, one hand on the handle, the other reaching for the chipped tin of chamomile I kept on the second shelf, right where my late husband used to tease me about it. "You and your sleepy flowers," he'd say. And then he'd kiss my forehead like I was something precious he wasn't allowed to waste. That kitchen was my kingdom. Not fancy, not new, just honest. The kind of place that smelled like toasted bread and lemon soap and the faintest trace of cedar from the old cupboards. He built when our backs were younger. I had spent years in that room stirring soups, grating papers, pressing dough, wiping counters, humming hymns, and laughing at things that seemed small until life made them sacred. I had raised a child there. One child, my only boy, the one I loved so fiercely I didn't notice when that love slowly turned into a door he could leave open. When the phone rang, I was folding linen napkins, the real ones, with the lace trim I only brought out when the world promised to behave. My fingers still remember how to do careful things. People think age makes you clumsy. It doesn't. Age makes you precise. You stop wasting motion. You learn what matters. The screen flashed his name, and my heart did what it always did. It softened first. Even after everything, that softness still lived inside me. Like an old bruise you don't touch but you don't forget is there. "Hi, Mom," he said, bright as polished glass. The kind of voice men use when they're smiling at someone on the other end, while already reaching for what they want. I held the phone between shoulder and cheek and looked at the napkins stacked like quiet promises. "Hello, sweetheart." He told me the news with a practiced cheer. His wife's parents were coming. They wanted to get to know me. He said it like it was a gift, like the universe had finally granted me an audience with my own family. He said staying at my house would be more personal, more comfortable, more authentic. And I listened, and I heard the word underneath all the words: convenient. He didn't ask if I wanted company. He asked if I could accommodate it. There's a difference. But good mothers are trained to treat difference like dust and wipe it away before anyone sees it. "Just a little while," he added quickly, like a child adding "I'll clean it up" after already making the mess. "It'll mean a lot to her. To all of us. To all of us," he said, and my chest tightened with something that almost felt like hope. Because hope is a stubborn animal. Hope survives on scraps. You tell it no for years, and it still waits by the door. So I said yes. Not because my bones wanted 3 extra people under my roof. Not because my nerves wanted fresh criticism in the air. I said yes because my son's voice had that old pleading shape in it, the one he used when he was little and wanted me to look at his drawing, to watch him ride his bike, to forgive him for breaking something he swore he didn't touch. He had learned early that my love was the one thing he could count on. He grew up and decided that meant it was infinite. The first day they arrived, the house felt smaller before the door even opened. Their luggage came in ahead of them: hard cases, shiny zippers, little tags that looked like passports. A driver carried them like they were delicate, like they couldn't be expected to hold the weight of their own lives. His mother-in-law stepped inside first, and the hallway light caught her pearls and made them look like tiny moons. She stood in my foyer and turned her head slowly, the way people do in museums. Her eyes moved over my framed photographs, my old mirror, my worn runner rug, as if she were cataloging what should be replaced. "Oh," she said, and it wasn't admiration, it was measurement. Cozy, her husband followed, a thick presence that brought the smell of expensive cologne and something older beneath it: entitlement, like stale smoke trapped in fabric. He didn't greet me properly. He nodded, once, as if that should be enough for a woman who had opened her home. My daughter-in-law arrived last, clicking in on heels like punctuation. She kissed the air near my cheek, the way women do when they don't want lipstick to smudge and don't want love to land. "Hi," she said, already scanning the room like she was looking for flaws to point out later. And my son, my boy, stood between them and me with that nervous smile that people wear when they know something is wrong but want it to be someone else's problem. I showed them upstairs. I had made the beds with fresh sheets and set small vases of flowers on the nightstand. I had placed extra towels in neat stacks, like little offerings of peace. I had even bought a basket of soaps, because I remembered what it felt like to be a guest and want to feel welcomed. They looked at the rooms, the way hungry people look at a menu. "Is this the best one?" my daughter-in-law asked. The curtains let in too much light, her mother said. Her father turned on the television before his suitcase was fully in the room, like he was claiming territory with noise. In my kitchen, I cooked the first night like I always did when I wanted to make something right. Pot roast, slow and tender, garlic in the air, potatoes buttery, green beans from the garden, food that said, "This is a home, not a stopover." He looked at his plate and said, almost casually, "I thought there'd be lamb." And it was such a small sentence, such a ridiculous complaint, that I almost laughed. But his wife's mother wrinkled her nose like the food had insulted her personally, and his wife asked if I had sparkling water instead of tap, and my son stared down at his fork and said nothing. In that moment something moved inside me. Not loudly, not like a door slamming, more like a lock turning. The next days were not days, they were a pattern, a loop, a choreography where I played a role I did not audition for. It began with tiny instructions. Could you bring tea? Could you warm this? Could you wipe that? And I did. Because at first, you tell yourself it's just adjusting, just nerves, just unfamiliarity. You tell yourself your son will step in. You tell yourself you're being gracious. You tell yourself kindness is strength. And then the instructions became expectations. And then the expectations became commands. Her father liked his coffee a certain way, at a certain time, in a certain mug. He would stand in my doorway and clear his throat like a man with a bell inside him. He left crumbs on my counter, ash on my tables, damp towels on the floor. As if my home were a hotel and I were part of the service. Her mother criticized my furniture. "These pieces are charming," she'd say, the word dangling like pity. "Have you thought of updating? It would brighten things. Modernize." She moved my decor without asking. She opened cabinets she had no reason to open. She handled my dishes like they were cheap. Once I found her in the living room with a tape measure, measuring the windows, murmuring about better drapes. My daughter-in-law claimed space the way vines do, quietly, quickly, everywhere. My bathroom became her staging area. Her perfumes lined my sink. Her skincare bottles crowded the shelf. She left bobby pins on my floor. She used my best towels and didn't hang them back up. She turned my sunroom into her little escape, and by escape she meant, she moved my chair and replaced it with hers. And my son watched it all happen like a man watching a storm outside a window, grateful it wasn't raining on him directly. Sometimes he would glance at me and offer a little apology that wasn't an apology. "They're just getting comfortable," he'd whisper. "You know how they are. Just for a little while. Just for a little while." That phrase can be a cage. It sounds temporary until you realize people build their lives inside it. The worst part wasn't the mess. It wasn't even the criticism. It was the way they spoke around me, through me, over me, like I was a piece of furniture that came with the house. I heard my daughter-in-law laugh with her mother in the hallway one afternoon. "It's lucky we're here," she said. "This place needed a lift." Her mother's voice responded, low and amused. "If he's smart, he'll get everything organized sooner than later. Before she gets, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Old age is the monster people whisper about when they want your life to feel like it's slipping from your hands." I stood there holding a stack of towels, and the words hit my chest like cold water. Not because they were new, because they were honest. It wasn't about bonding. It wasn't about family. It was about my house, my security, the home my husband and I built, the one I kept alive alone for years after he died. They were not visiting. They were rehearsing ownership. And my son, my only son, was letting them. That night, I went into my husband's study. I hadn't spent much time in there since he passed. Grief has a way of turning certain rooms into museums. You stand at the doorway and feel the air change. His chair was still there, the leather worn in the exact shape of his body. His desk held the same faint scent of cedar and ink. There was a photograph of us on a shelf, younger, standing on the front steps with paint on our hands, laughing like we had all the time in the world. I stood in that room and felt the ache of what I had lost and the fury of what someone was trying to take. And something in me settled. Not the kind of settling that means giving up, the kind that means deciding. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I stood in that room and felt the ache of what I had lost and the fury of what someone was trying to take. And something in me settled. Not the kind of settling that means giving up, the kind that means deciding. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't march downstairs and demand respect. There are people who fight like fire. I have never been one of them. I fight like winter. Quiet, patient, certain. I wait until the ground is hard enough to hold what I'm about to do. I sat at his desk and pulled out the folder where I kept the papers that mattered, deeds, insurance, documents, with signatures that held the weight of my life. I had always been careful. My husband used to say I had the mind of a lawyer and the heart of a teacher. He meant it as a compliment, even when it frustrated him. I opened my laptop, and I did not look for comfort. I looked for options. By the time dawn arrived, I had a plan that was so calm it almost felt like mercy. For me, not them. I became, overnight, the easiest woman in the world. When my daughter-in-law handed me a list of groceries without looking up from her phone, I smiled and said, "Of course." When her mother complained about my coffee creamer as if dairy was a moral issue, I nodded and said, "I'll see what I can do." When her father left his shoes in the hallway like he owned the floor, I stepped around them like they were invisible. My son thought my softness meant surrender. He thought my silence meant acceptance. He had forgotten the difference between being quiet and being defeated. In the small gaps when they were gone, boutique trips, spa days, brunches I wasn't invited to, I moved. A realtor came first. A woman with sharp eyes and a measured voice. She walked through my house with respect, not judgment. She asked me questions like I was the owner, because I was. She didn't look at my life like it was an inconvenience to be improved. She looked at it like it was valuable. When she told me the market, I nearly laughed at the number. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd that my son and his people had thought they could corner me in my own home. As if my only currency was affection. Then I spoke to a lawyer. A practical woman who didn't flinch at my story, who listened the way professionals do when they smell exploitation. She explained what I already knew, that the deed was mine, the power was mine, the choice was mine. She said words like eviction and notice and legal occupancy, and I felt something loosen in my ribs. A tightness I hadn't admitted was there. I began packing my treasures first, the things that held soul. Photographs, letters, my husband's watch, my grandmother's brooch, the ceramic little animal my daughter made me when she was 8. She's grown, now living far away, always calling, always asking if I'm okay, in a way my son never did. I wrapped each piece like I was wrapping my own heartbeat. I labeled boxes with ordinary words: donation, storage, books, because ordinary words hide extraordinary intentions. They didn't notice. They were too busy designing a future inside a house they hadn't earned. One evening, my daughter-in-law hosted a dinner party without asking. Not a request, a declaration? She told me as if she was announcing the weather. "A few friends are coming Friday. Keep it simple. Keep it simple." As if feeding people in your own home was a chore someone else delegated. So Friday came, and I cooked the way I always cooked when I wanted to show love. Small bites arranged like art. Soup in delicate cups. Bread toasted just right. My hands moved with the quiet rhythm of a woman who knows how to care. Guests arrived in perfume and laughter and shiny shoes. And they stood in my living room like they were in a showroom. They complimented my house in a way that didn't feel like a compliment. So much potential. Such good bones. Once you modernize. My daughter-in-law floated through the room in her own spotlight, and her mother hovered like a critic, tasting, judging, asking for spices like I was catering a wedding I hadn't been invited to. Her father made jokes too loud and too long, snapping his fingers for more crackers like I was a dog trained to fetch. And my son stood near the mantel, wine in hand, eyes on the conversation, not on me. Not once did he look over and see his mother carrying trays in the home she built. Not once did he say, "Stop." Not once did he remember who raised him. When someone laughed at a joke about my old-fashioned taste, I felt the laugh land on my skin like a slap. I stood there holding a tray, and I realized something that was both painful and freeing. They weren't going to change. And I wasn't going to beg them to. After the guests left, my daughter-in-law kissed the air near my cheek again, and said, "That went well. You did fine. You did fine." Like I'd passed an audition, my son lingered in the kitchen and asked, "You okay, Mom?" I dried a glass slowly, put it away, and turned off the light. "I'm wonderful," I said. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. It was prophecy. The next morning, while they were out enjoying the city, I signed the papers. There is something holy about a signature when it is your own. The pen in your hand. The name you have carried through births and funerals and storms. The quiet certainty that your life belongs to you. I didn't tell them. I didn't announce it with drama. I simply scheduled their consequences the way you schedule repairs. Calmly, efficiently, without apology. When the movers came, they came early. Quiet men in clean gloves who treated my belongings with respect. We moved what mattered. My books, my keepsakes, my dishes. The chair by the window where my husband used to read. I left behind the things that had become tainted by other people's entitlement: furniture they had claimed, towels they had demanded, spaces they had colonized. By noon, my home was emptier, lighter, like it could finally breathe. I walked through each room one last time alone. The hallway where my son had once raced his toy cars. The kitchen where my husband had danced with me while soup simmered. The garden where I had planted roses after he died, as if blooming could be a form of survival. I didn't mourn the walls. I honored them. Then I left. My new place wasn't a palace. It was peace. A small suite high enough above street noise that you could hear your own thoughts again. Clean lines. Soft light. A balcony that looked out over the city like a promise. A door that locked, and only I had the key. The notice was delivered later that afternoon, not by me. Not by my hand. That's what professionals are for. A thick envelope. Official language. Dates, terms. Vacate by. Ownership transferred. Demolition scheduled. They called me, of course. In a panic at first, then in rage. My phone lit up like a warning siren. My son left voicemails that started with disbelief and ended with desperation. His wife's family yelled in the background. Words like, "How could you, and this is insane, and we live here. You live here. In my house. In my life. In the space my husband and I built so I would be safe." I listened to one voicemail. Only one. Because I needed to hear his voice when he realized I was not the kind of mother you can turn into a piece of furniture. "Mom," he said, and for once the polish was gone. "What is happening?" There's people here. They're saying we have to leave. Please call me. Please call me." Like he'd ever said please when it mattered. I didn't call. I let my lawyer respond. Calm, final. Everything routed through counsel. Everything documented. No room for manipulation. No space for misunderstanding. No opportunity for him to twist my words into a story where I was the unreasonable one. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and watched the sky go purple. The city hummed below like a distant ocean. For the first time in years, my shoulders dropped. Not because I'd won, because I had stopped losing. A week later, I heard through a neighbor that they'd moved into a cramped rental, and the mother-in-law complained about the kitchen. The father-in-law fought with a building manager. My daughter-in-law posted smiling photos online. Because that's what some people do when their lives are burning. They upload the smoke and call it a filter. My son didn't post anything. I heard, through the grapevine of shared acquaintances, that he was embarrassed, that he felt betrayed, that he told people he didn't see it coming. He didn't see it coming because he never saw me. He saw what he wanted: comfort, access, a mother who would always absorb discomfort so he wouldn't have to. In the quiet weeks that followed, I did what I should have done long before. I put my affairs in order. I created a trust, not for him, but for the ones I could still protect. I made sure no one who had treated me like a servant would benefit from my life again. I arranged my legacy like a garden, pruned where it was rotten, watered where it was still alive. I wrote letters. Not angry ones, honest ones. I wrote to my grandchildren in the future tense. The way you speak to someone you want to reach, even if time tries to steal you. I wrote to my daughter, thanking her for seeing me. I wrote to myself, too, which is something women forget they're allowed to do. On the morning of demolition, I woke before the sun. I made tea in my favorite porcelain cup, the one someone had called tacky, in my own kitchen, and I smiled at the memory because it no longer had teeth. I stepped onto the balcony barefoot and let the cool air wrap around me. Far away, in the neighborhood that had held my entire adult life, machines were beginning their work. I couldn't hear them from here. I didn't need to. I could see the faint movement, the tiny shifts like ants around something large. It felt strange, watching a place you loved become a future you won't live in. But love and possession are not the same. I had loved that house. A message came in from my lawyer. It's begun. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I simply stood there and let myself feel the clean ache of closure. A house is wood and stone and nails. A home is dignity. A home is the way you are treated inside your own walls. When my walls stopped protecting me, I stopped protecting them. That afternoon, my son texted a sentence that sounded like a wound trying to blame the knife. "I can't believe you did this to family." I read it once, twice, then I deleted it, because I wasn't going to store his guilt in my pocket anymore. Later, my daughter called. Her voice came through clear and steady, like a hand on my back. "Mama," she said, "are you okay?" And I surprised myself by answering the truth. "Yes," I said softly, "I am." We talked about small things after that: what she was cooking, what book she was reading, how her work was going. Ordinary life. The kind of life you can only enjoy when you're not being asked to earn your place in it. That night, I set the table for one. I lit a candle. I cooked salmon the way I liked it, lemony and bright, and ate slowly. I watched the city lights blink on like distant stars. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. There's a difference. 2. Loneliness is being unseen. Alone is being unburdened. Sometimes, late, when the apartment is quiet, I think of my husband. I imagine him sitting across from me, eyebrows raised, that half smile he wore when I did something bold. I can almost hear him say, "That's my girl," like he did when I stood my ground in a room full of louder people. And I think of my son, too. Not the man he is now, but the boy he was. Small hands, scraped knees, calling for me in the night. I loved him so much I would have walked through fire for him. I did, in a way. But love is not supposed to burn you down to keep someone else warm. I don't know what happens to men who mistake a mother's silence for consent. I don't know if my son will ever find his way back to decency, or if he'll spend his life telling stories where he is the victim of a woman who finally stopped serving him. What I do know is this: there is a kind of death that happens when you let people treat you like you're already gone, like your needs are irrelevant, like your home is just a resource, like your kindness is a tool. And there is a kind of resurrection that happens when you choose yourself without begging permission. I'm in my 70s now. My hands are a little slower. My knees complain when the weather changes. But my mind has never been clearer. I can tell the difference between love and leverage, between family and possession, between peace and silence. If you're listening and you feel that familiar act, the one that comes from being used inside, the very life you built, please hear me. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to become cruel to be free. Sometimes, the strongest revenge is simply refusing to be available for mistreatment ever again. Sometimes the loudest justice is a quiet signature on a page that says, "I belong to me." And when the night comes, when the city settles, when the world grows soft around the edges, I sit with my tea, and I listen to the hum of my own breath. It's steady, it's real, it's mine. They tried to turn me into a servant in the home I built. They tried to make me small enough to step over. They tried to write my role as background noise. But I have lived too long to be erased. And even now, when the lights are low, I can still hear the echo of my husband's laughter in my bones. Like a lantern in the dark, reminding me of the oldest truth I know. A woman can lose a house. She can lose a marriage. She can lose people she once called family. But if she keeps her name intact, if she keeps her spirit unclaimed, she will always find her way home. Even if home is nothing more than a quiet balcony, a warm cup in her hands, and the soft, haunting peace of finally belonging to herself.